Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, we're going to kick it off. My name is Brian Shea. I'm a Salesforce architect and consultant. And I'm going to be talking about strategy design today. A little bit about me. I'm located in Boston in the US. As it says here, 12X certified, including the strategy designer cert. I've been independent self-employed consultant for 10 years, and I've been building CRMs from the technical side for 18 years. And you can find me on the internet at these places, LinkedIn and Twitter. So we're going to hit a few things today. I'm going to talk about strategy design as a concept. What is it? How is it the same or different from some analysis things that you might be familiar with? And then I'm going to talk about the new Salesforce strategy designer certification that was launched this year. We'll talk about who. Yeah, is there a question?
No, there was no question. Let me mute everybody.
Okay. I will talk about the new cert and who should consider taking it, and then I'll talk a little bit about the types of questions on the exam and how you can study for it and study resources. So that's the idea. I'll spend most of my time on what strategy design is, and then we'll talk about the cert itself a little bit, and then we can take some questions at the end. As I mentioned before, very informal, very conversational session. So as you have questions, feel free to either speak up or put them in the chat, and Jitendra will ask me the questions in real time. All right. So before I kick into the content, I want to ask you all a question just to make sure we're all aligned in terms of who's on this call and what folks want to get out of it. How many folks come from a kind of an IT background or a Salesforce admin / technical background? And if you can just kind of take a second and put it into the chat.
Yeah. She pulled it out.
Thanks. So let's see. 17 years of IT experience, Salesforce admin, Salesforce consultant, IT developer, started on the business side, then moved into IT, Salesforce admin to declarative development. Awesome. 8+ years developer and architect. Awesome. Okay. So I will assume those responses are representative of everyone on the call, and thanks for folks that posted that. The background that you all mentioned is a similar background that I come from, which is IT, Salesforce on the technical side, enterprise applications, etc. And I found that the strategy designer certification had a lot of concepts that I was familiar with from like business analysis and concepts like that are familiar with IT from the IT perspective. But also there was a lot of new things that I learned. So I am going to, when I approach strategy design, it's from that perspective of kind of coming from the IT side. So I think my perspective kind of aligns with many of yours. So at a high level, strategy design is something that is kind of becoming a more popular concept within the Salesforce ecosystem. As I mentioned, there was a cert that was launched earlier this year around strategy design. And Denise Burchell, who is Senior Director of Design at Salesforce and one of the kind of the leaders in this space, wrote a fantastic article when the cert was launched. And she defines it as strategy design is the practice of helping organizations identify opportunities from a human-centered innovation and align behind a vision of what to build. And she kind of contrasts it later in the article with there's sort of folks from the corporate side or corporate strategists that look at problems from a company point of view. And then there are folks from the creative side, user experience side, that think a lot about creative problem solving. And what Denise says the strategy designers see the entire spectrum. So they look at problems from multiple lenses and multiple people that are impacted, multiple stakeholders. So it's very much a holistic and a human-centered approach to identifying areas of opportunity and problems and figuring out solutions for how to solve it. So I'm going to ask folks, I think the answer to this question is yes. I know it's definitely a yes for me. But how many folks on this call have ever worked on a failed IT project or a failed Salesforce project? And failed in terms of it was late, it was over budget, it was delivered, but the users or clients weren't ultimately satisfied with the solution. So if folks can just do a quick yes or no in the chat. Let's see what we got. Yes, 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 me, who hasn't? Yes, on failed projects. Living through that right now. I'm sorry, Melissa. Yeah, and not yet really. Okay, so one person who hasn't. Is there anybody else besides Sambir who has not yet had the fun of experiencing a failed IT project? So I'll take that as most folks didn't stay until fails. Okay, that's also a strategy. So most people have experienced this. Oh, great, Melissa. Went my first 4 years in the Salesforce ecosystem without experiencing that. So most people have, if you've spent time in this space, have experienced this. And from my experience, and also there's kind of survey data to back this up, the most common reason that IT projects fail is because the team doesn't fully understand the needs and problems of their customers. So it's not about we didn't build a quality solution. We didn't build something on spec. We didn't build something that wasn't of high technical quality. The problem was that the solution that was ultimately delivered didn't address the core problems that the customers were trying to solve. So in other words, the team is trying to build a solution to a problem that the customer doesn't even have. Okay, so the solution, the way we address that is to better understand what our customers want. And when I say customers, I mean our users, the senior leaders who are sponsoring the project, maybe the end customers of our client. There's multiple different people we put in that customer stakeholder bucket, but it's about understanding what the core problem that they have and how do we address it. And that is where strategy design comes in. When we're talking about folks coming from an IT or Salesforce technical background, we spend a lot of our time on the delivery side. So like I mentioned, how do we write good specifications to define exactly what the solution will do? How do we build it right? How do we test it right and make sure that the solution accurately delivers on the specification? This is all about what we call building the thing right. So whatever we've set out to build, how do we build it the right way? But strategy design is about identifying what should we be building? What is the thing that we should be building? We say sometimes it's build the right thing versus build the thing right. Okay. And to kind of put some color around the example, let's take an example of a company that has a sales process. Okay. And let's say that the company has they get a lot of leads in the door, so that's great. And they close a high percentage of their, their closing sales calls. So at the beginning of the journey or the beginning of the funnel and at the end of the funnel, they're doing really well, right? A lot of leads and a lot of closes. That's great. But what they found is in the middle of the journey, people that come in and express interest, not a lot of them are getting to that final sales call. So in the middle of their funnel or in the middle of their journey, there's a problem. There's a lot of leakage in the funnel, or there's a lot of people who aren't engaged, a lot of possible customers or clients that aren't engaged. So that's a problem for the company. And it's a problem that impacts different stakeholders in different ways. Senior management might have a particular view on that. Your salespeople might have a particular view on it. Your customers may have a different view on it, on why that is. Why is that engagement going down in the middle? That's a business problem, right? And there's multiple ways that you could brainstorm on how to address that business problem. And actually, I'm going to take one moment. And if we think about that example of kind of low engagement in the middle of the funnel, can people in the chat, just real quick, I'm going to pause for a second. Can people brainstorm and put in the chat ways that this problem could be addressed by a client? I'll take, people think on that, and I'll take 2 minutes, and as you have ideas, throw them in. User stories, okay. What else we got? Looking at better automation for stages, awesome. Better design, report design, better design, email engagement, awesome. We got anything? These are all great. Value-driven approach to priority. Jitendra's done the strategy design thing. So conducting workshops, great. Small MVP approach with agile approach. Yes. What else? Okay, so those are all fantastic. So we've got, yep, we invoke our UX team, customer satisfaction, right? So these are all great either tools or analysis in design methodologies to figure out how we can improve this. And if we think about, if we throw out a few simple examples, right, for leakage in the middle of the funnel, we could have, as somebody mentioned, automated messages, right? Okay, there's automated messages that are sent out to people, to potential customers in that space. So you stay top of mind, your company stays top of mind. That's one thing. Another thing could be maybe you're already sending out automated messages, but the content isn't engaging. So people are receiving messages, but the content is engaging. That's not even a technical solution per se. It's about content creation. Maybe there's more outreach that needs to happen. Maybe your sales team can be more engaging with people more often. Maybe your salespeople are engaging with people. Maybe your salespeople are engaging with folks, but they just don't know who to engage with. So maybe there's a way to get more intelligence around who they should be engaging with. And Annette just said, need to do analysis of the business process. Absolutely. And we're going to talk more about that in a second. But the idea is we have a problem, and there's a process to figure out, okay, what is the problem? What are the different perspectives on the problem? And thinking about solutions to that problem. And that really gets to the heart of strategy design. It's really about understanding, deeply understanding the folks that we're working with, and figuring out the best way to address the needs and address the problem that we're dealing with. Again, if we think about our middle of funnel example, if we understand our customers, we're going to get a better sense of, is this a problem with we're not communicating enough, right? We need to send more automated messages, or is this an issue of we're already communicating enough, but the quality of our content isn't good? That's something that only the end customer is going to be able to answer for us. And then if we think about our salespeople that could be reaching out, really by working with them and by looking at data, we're going to be able to tell, do they need to reach out more? Is the problem that there needs to be a higher volume of outreach? Or is the problem that we need to have we need to have a better intelligence about who we're reaching out to. And again, we got to look at our work with our salespeople to figure out which path we should go down. And so strategy design is all about understanding those various perspectives and those various stakeholders, and then brainstorm about the best way to address whatever challenges they have. Okay. So when we think about a lot of what we do in the IT space, we're doing work oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes it's about delivering on the solution that's already been more or less defined, even if at a high level, it's been more or less defined. So the project or the user story is about getting more data into the hands of the salesperson so they can do more targeted outreach. That solution has already been defined, but strategy design is about figuring out what the solution should be at kind of a higher, more strategic level. I'm going to pause there because there was a lot that I threw out in terms of framing concepts. Does that distinction between strategy design versus delivery, does that make sense to folks, or is it kind of abstract and unclear? You can type it in the chat. Similar to solution design. Yep. Yeah, there's definitely overlap between solution design and business analysis and strategy design. BA. Yep. Very similar to BA. And I'm going to talk about some of the overlapping concepts in a sec. Has anybody, which roles are responsible on Salesforce, on strategy design? So Sambir, that's a great question. One of the things about this concept of strategy design, particularly in an IT or Salesforce space, is there's not necessarily a job title called strategy designer. Okay, so I play the role on my projects of a solution architect or consultant, and I'm often the one that's leading the strategy design type of work with my clients. But I don't have the title of strategy designer, and it's still a relatively rare title. You might see consultancies have like strategist or something like that, but it's often the project lead or maybe the product owner that's actually the one doing strategy design. So that's a great question. Great question. Business analysts do a couple of these activities. Absolutely. So one of the ways people mention business analysis, and there's definitely a ton of overlap there. When we break down discovery versus delivery, I put requirements and user stories, which a lot of times fall under the business analysis space, actually in the delivery column. And the reason why I do that is a lot of times it's about taking a solution that's at somewhat of a high level already defined. So in the example of our middle of funnel issue, the solution, the ballpark of the solution might be, we're going to do better lead scoring in Salesforce. That's going to be our solution. The business analyst gets involved and says, okay, let's do user stories about lead scoring. Let's refine requirements around lead scoring. Let's define requirements around this solution. The strategy design piece is kind of at a different level or a higher level. And it's about, what are the needs of our customers? And is the best solution to that lead scoring? Is it about better outreach from the sales team or more outreach from the sales team? Is it about more automated messages? Is it about better content? What is that? What is the high level solution that we should be going after to solve this problem? So that's kind of where I draw the distinction between BA and delivery and the strategy design and discovery work. But it is definitely a gray area. And I know that there are orgs that user stories are much more of I would put much more in the strategy design discovery space than in the delivery space, but it's kind of a can be a gray area depending on the organization. I have a comment from Annette. I see strategy more around what and why than how at 100%. It's about what and why and how. To me, user stories are the how we use to address the what and the why. So that's a good comment. And like I mentioned, different organizations may use user stories in different ways. May use user stories in different ways. So if we look at this delivery column, we talked about requirements and user stories, but everything else on this list is really about defining the solution, functional specifications, defining the functions of our solution. Future state business process definition, again, around defining what the steps of our future state is going to be. System architecture, how do we make sure we design the solution in a way that long-term addresses this, and then implementation. Our discovery or strategy design methods are around how might we statements are about how might we solve this problem that we're trying to address. So we have a problem in the middle of the funnel. How might we solve that? We talked about the various options there. Identifying desired outcomes. So in our case, our desired outcome would be to have more engagement, to have our customers more engaged with us and be providing more value to our customers in the middle of the funnel. Melissa has a question: is delivery even considered part of strategy design? Not, I would say the answer to that would be no. Delivery is not part of strategy design per se. But one thing I'd say is this model of saying discovery down the left and delivery down the right, this is not to say we're doing like a waterfall type approach. And it's like you do all this discovery and strategy up front, and then you do the delivery. This is very much, these things are happening alongside each other. So if we think about continuous discovery, always getting feedback from our users and our customers, that's happening alongside discovery. Or if we think about we build something and then we get feedback on it. This is not we do all the discovery and strategy design up front and then we just build stuff. So I just want to be clear about that. I know when I've given this presentation before, there's sometimes a misconception around this being like a waterfall method, which it definitely is not. Annette, I would think it would be that you need a strategic plan sometimes on how to implement. Absolutely. And in this, Annette, this gets back to the concept of kind of that waterfall concept again, and this not being like a waterfall methodology. Definitely strategic planning is an important part of this. And when I say strategic planning, a lot of people think about, okay, we're going to do a strategic plan, or we're going to have an offsite summit retreat, and we're going to come up with the strategic plan. Those things are valuable, but also your strategy design work is happening continuously, and you're listening to customers, listening to users happening continuously. It's not just it's not an event. It's something that's always going on. All right. We had talked, a lot of people very put the comment in the box that strategy design sounds a lot like business analysis, and there's definitely a lot of overlap between the two. So what I wanted to do is pull out one of the strategy design methods, and this is in the Salesforce Strategy Designer certification. It's one of the big methods in it, and I want to talk about what this is because I think there's a lot of overlap between some business analysis concepts, but I think this journey mapping concept within strategy design brings some new things to the table. And before I do that, I just see one question. Could strategy design be also categorized as architecture? I would say, Salvatore, my definition of architecture is solution architecture or system architecture is defining how defining the design, the technical design of the solution. to make sure it's extensible and solves the problems that you want. So again, we're in that solution space. We're defining how the solution should be built. And that delivery space, strategy design is more around defining what solution we should be going after. What are the needs and what is the high level solution? So the concept of journey mapping, it's a kind of an illustration of what journey mapping is. If you look at this, and apologies that it's small, it looks a little bit like a swim lane diagram, a business process swim lane diagram that BAs and IT folks are super familiar with. And this is called journey mapping or a journey map. And it definitely has a lot of overlap. But I want to walk through what journey mapping does, and I think you'll see some areas where you'll get some additional insights from our journey mapping exercise. So journey mapping hits on 7 different dimensions, and I'll mention them real quick. There's phases or process, number 1, or stages is another thing people say. Actions, thoughts, feelings, touch points, content, and opportunities. So I'm going to just briefly touch on what each of those is. Phases are the things that business analysts are very familiar with. What are the stages of the process? What is the functional steps that happen during this process? So if we're talking about our funnel example, these are the the stages of our opportunity, right? Actions are the kind of the actions that are taken during those phases. So it's at a little bit lower level. It's also important to call out that actions in the context of journey mapping aren't just the actions that happen with the system. So it's not just about, I'm a salesperson using Salesforce and what are the actions that I take in relation to Salesforce. It's about all the actions that I need to do online and offline, et cetera, to work in that stage. So if there's, let's say we're talking about a salesperson and there's some research that they need to do outside of Salesforce to figure out what the customer's interest in or what the customer's business is about. That would be an example of an action in this session that has nothing to do with Salesforce, but it's an action that's important to our stakeholder, in this example, the salesperson. Thoughts. So thoughts, again, we're getting further and further away from technical stuff and we're getting into thoughts. So what is our salesperson thinking about and considering as they're doing their actions? So for example, if they're doing research on doing online research about a customer, making phone calls to get some background information about a customer, what are the thoughts and considerations that our salesperson is going through? Feelings, again, getting even further away from the technical. How is our salesperson feeling about the various things that they're doing? Are they happy that they're doing research offline about the customer, or is this something that's frustrating to them? And this is really important to understand when we talk about failed projects earlier on. A lot of times a solution may functionally on paper do what our hypothetical salesperson needs it to do, but maybe it's too technically complex for the person. Maybe where our salespeople are not people that feel comfortable with new technology, and we put together a perfectly suitable solution for salespeople that are comfortable with technology, but our salespeople aren't. So the feeling of frustration or confusion or insecurity even are things that our salespeople are feeling when they're interacting with the solution. Again, not because it's necessarily a bad solution, it's just a solution that doesn't fit the skills and experiences of our particular salespeople. Touch points are interactions that happen between various parties in this journey. Oftentimes touch points are how the customer is interacting with our company. So if we're looking at our journey map from the perspective of a customer, it could be where and when are they going to the website, or looking at our marketing assets, or when are they looking at interacting with salespeople, for instance. Context is additional context that's useful during this stage. And again, this is things that are happening most likely away from Salesforce itself. And again, we're getting away from the technical here. And then opportunities are areas, brainstorming areas where there's opportunities for improvement. So again, if we think about sort of when we see frustrations rising up in our journey, those are areas that could potentially be opportunity areas. So I am going to pause there and ask a question to folks. We talked about business analysis, and I talked a little bit about how this may bring some new concepts to your business analysis concepts, for instance, the thoughts and the feelings. For folks that have done BA work or worked on projects with BA work, are the thoughts and feelings, is that a new concept to you, or is it something that you're already doing in your BA work? I'll give folks a couple minutes to put that in the chat. And Jitendra too, while I am pausing here to let people put in the chat, put their thoughts in the chat, want to ask you, are there any questions that you've gotten directly to you that we can address now as well?
Not yet, Brian. I have not received any question.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
I don't actually. I just have a thought, right? So I know that you're saying that mostly the BAs are doing it, but what my experience have been, I have seen consultants doing most of the strategy work. Not so many BAs I have seen doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. When you say consultants, you mean like an external consultant is coming in and doing this this kind of strategy design work?
No. I think the consultant, when I say, it's mostly from our UX team, maybe just from my company. But in our company, we definitely do the strategy designing, but those are the mostly consultants from the UX side, or someone who has a domain knowledge. So let's say if your client is from the industry or finance, right? So those are the consultants, are the one who are mostly running all these workshops, especially around the strategy.
Got it. Okay. So it's basically, you're saying it's UX folks and it's people from the business side.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then the BA is doing more of the like user stories and kind of functional requirements and those kind of things.
That's right. Yeah, there are some VAs, definitely. I think I will say the senior VAs who have been in industry for the long time. Now they know how the industry works, how everything, and they go above and beyond just writing the user stories, right? And then they start participating on the workshops, right? Trying to get the value out of it, right? Trying to ask the right question, not just listening to the customer that what their pain point is.
Yeah.
So,
yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good, I find that as well. And I know there's a lot of work going on in the ecosystem about sort of putting more with the business analyst cert, putting a little bit more structure and a little bit more rigor around the BA role and making it more of a senior role, I think, which is a great thing. But I agree with you. I see a lot of BAs not doing this kind of strategy design work. And it's not to say a a generalist or a Salesforce BA is going to take the place of somebody with deep domain knowledge. But it is something where, because of a BA's background of being analytical, of understanding processes, it is a place where I think BAs can play more of a role in this strategy design work.
100%, right. And I think Salesforce is really doing good in that side
Yeah.
by launch of the BA certification, the strategy, right? It's kind of setting up kind of trail or the path for all the
Yep.
aspiring BAs and the consultants that, okay, where they have to focus. And the good thing is there's so many materials available in the market, right? Not only, not that was related to the Salesforce themselves, right? But now we have a trailhead, we have approach, we have the journey map, right? All the content and the framework that is available. I'm pretty sure we will see in the next few months, next few years, that the process for the BA and the consultant, right, is getting more formalized and more standardized in the
Yep.
Salesforce system.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing, because you see such a wide variety in a lot of roles. You see a wide variety of what is in a job description, but I think for BAs, I think it'll be good to have a little bit more of a standard, and it being a little bit more of a senior role.
Yeah,
Uh,
100.
So real quick, I'm going to look at, thanks for folks that put in comments here. I'm just going to go through these real quick. So Melissa, thanks again. Melissa said, definitely dealing with thoughts and feelings. That's awesome. As a manufacturer, we have to consider internal users, distributors, contractors, and homeowners. Lots of feelings from every different side. That's awesome. Abis, I see it as a mix. I see it as a mix of actions taken by the architect, the BA, and the PM. Absolutely. Yeah, this is one of the things that's an important concept here, is this isn't just one person doing it. It's very much a team effort, and different roles should be involved. How frequently to touch base with business for discovery review on ongoing project tasks to get the inputs? That's a great question, Srini. I would say generally the more the better. We use the word continuous a lot, because the idea is that this isn't something where the business side is doing the strategy and the discovery, and then they're handing over findings to the IT team or the business team. We want it to be as much of a team effort that's happening continuously, and that there's clear communication that's happening all the time. That's kind of an agile concept, but it's also very much kind of a strategy design and product management, continuous discovery concept. As the person responsible for the health of our org, I find I'm doing a lot of strategic advising between different solution architects, BAs, and business leads across different niches in our business. That's awesome, Annette. Our BA only focus on their part of the business, as do our solutions architect, and we need a central person with a broad view. That's exactly it. We struggle with role clarity with BAs and with product owners. Yes, yes, and yes. So I'm going to repeat, actually, Annette, this is awesome. Our BAs only focus on their part of the business, as do solutions architects. We need a central person with a broad view. So that's it, right? In order to do that strategy design work and figure out what problems we should be solving, you need somebody who's got a broad view, understands the various stakeholders, understands deeply what their challenges are. And within delivery, we need to be a part of that as well. But it's kind of a natural thing that once we get into delivery as BAs or as solution architects, we necessarily need to just focus on our one solution that we're doing. So it's important to have kind of both ways of looking at it. And yeah, like Jitendra and I were talking earlier, we struggle with role clarity with BAs and with product owners. So you are not unique in that. Everest, what unique set of skills do you think a strategy designer needs to have? There's obviously a lot of overlap between consultants, BAs, solutions architects, and need to cover some aspects of strategy, but what do you think sets them aside? That is a great question. I think the thing that really great strategy designers do is that they're really great at interviewing. They have really great interview skills. And when I say interview, I mean not like a job interview, but like they spend a lot of time and they have a process for understanding the folks that they're serving. And again, who are they serving? Their customers, their internal users, their stakeholders. They have a knack and a process and tools for understanding what folks need. And then they have a process for brainstorming what the best way to solve those needs of their constituents. That, I think, is the heart of a good strategy design person. A lot of times on projects, the way the solution is selected is it's a very small group of kind of senior stakeholders that have a hunch about the best way to solve a particular problem. And I'd say the strategy designer really breaks that open and brings a lot of rich knowledge about users and customer needs, and then has a process for figuring out what the best solution is. It's not just like a few people on the leadership team are identifying what's going to happen. Annette, Jitendra said, Annette, you definitely need clear RACI, define clear roles and responsibilities. Absolutely. In clear job descriptions. And Annette said, yes, but if they only paid attention to the RACI, unless there is something they don't want to do. So that is also true. So this is great. And I'm looking at the time. We've got about 17 minutes left, and I want to get into actually talking about the actual certification itself, because if folks are interested in the certification, we want to get into that. But I'd say if the concepts that we're talking about having more tools to understand our users and our customers, and then more tools of brainstorming and validating what the best solution for those customers and users is. If that is of interest to you and you're working on projects and you're working with customers, then strategy design is something that you want to check out. And if you're doing BA work, there's a lot of this stuff you're doing already, most likely, and strategy design tools may be beneficial for you. And we've talked about that. So the strategy design certification, as I mentioned, was launched in 2022. It was announced at TDX this year, and then I believe in May, the exam actually opened up. So who should consider this exam? We talked about this already a little bit, but it's applicable to Salesforce professionals who lead projects and work with stakeholders or users. So for example, we talked about consultants and we talked about architects. And I would say, while this certification it's very popular among consultants, people that work as consultants for a living, it can also be really powerful for people that work in-house. So for people who are the Salesforce product owner at a company, the Salesforce product manager at a company, the director of CRM, the director of business applications, the folks that are sitting and really helping to define the direction of Salesforce, their Salesforce org at the company. This is a fantastic skill set that if you're doing it already, it's great to get certified to make sure your gaps are filled and to be recognized for that certification. And if you're not doing these kinds of things yet, the certification can be a great way to learn some new skills. As I mentioned before, the people familiar with BA work are going to find these things familiar. And as I mentioned, business analysis generally focuses on functional needs, not always, but a lot of times we're focused on processes and stages and what functions need to happen. Strategy design focuses on functional, emotional, and social levels as well. So there are no prerequisites for this exam, but Salesforce considers it a relatively senior exam. So there are some recommended experiences that folks should have before they kind of take the exam. So the 3 that are laid out by Salesforce, 1 is 3 years of hands-on experience as a strategy designer. Again, as we talked about earlier, that doesn't mean your title is strategy designer, but it means you're doing the kind of work that we have talked about. So, your title could be consultant, architect, product manager, it could be UX lead, but you're doing this strategy design work and you've got hands-on experience doing it, leading workshops, doing customer interviews, all that stuff falls into this. 1 to 2 years of experience on the Salesforce platform, and 2 years of experience leading complex projects, including advanced facilitation and consultative skills. So that's who should take it. In terms of the exam itself, this exam is probably no surprise to folks. It's less technical from a knowledge perspective than some other exams that you're familiar with. So if you're familiar with, the architect exams, or you're familiar with the admin exams, this exam is going to be less technical. And the focus is on strategy design methods and what business scenario each is applicable to. So if you go through the content in Trailhead, there's a whole bunch of design methods that are laid out there. I talked about journey mapping, that's one of them, but there's a whole bunch of others. There's interview skills, there's prototyping skills, there's a framework called Jobs to be Done, which is about understanding kind of the psychology around what people need. There's probably 24 different methods within the strategy design cert, maybe even more than that. And it's really about understanding what all those methods are, and then identifying when they should be used. Also in the exam, there's a focus on applying Salesforce features and capabilities to better understand customers and inform strategy design. So we talked about how strategy design is about understanding our customers better. And so the question is, how can we use Salesforce to get better information about our customers and their needs? So for example, something like Service Cloud. Okay, Service Cloud is great for capturing case information. How can we use that data to better understand our customers? What Salesforce features and capabilities would allow us to do that within Service Cloud, for example? So those are the areas that this cert focuses on. In terms of exam preparation, there's a couple ways that I'd recommend. First, as with any exam, Trailhead is a great place to start. So there's a couple of different trails that are relevant. There's the Salesforce Strategy Designer Career Trail Mix. And that one is a little bit relatively shorter than the other one. It covers the bulk of the material on the exam. It doesn't cover actually everything, but it covers a lot of the stuff. So that's one. And then there is a longer trail called Prepare for Your Strategy Designer Credentials Trail Mix. This one is longer. Both of them are great for preparing for the exam. I'd also say I mentioned that it's really about understanding the strategy design methods and understanding what they're for and when they should be applied. So I actually wrote an article for Salesforce Ben about this cert, and in that article you can actually see I put a list of probably 24 strategy design methods. One thing you could do to study for the exam is take all those methods in that article or in the trail mix, and you could create flashcards, each one with the method, one sentence on what the method is all about, and then where you would apply it. So the purpose of the method. And when I talk about purpose, one of the concepts within strategy design that's important is around widening versus narrowing. So widening is about generating new ideas and about increasing possible options. So when we talked about our middle of funnel situation, we actually did an idea generation session in the chat. We said, how might we solve this? How might we, statements are another method in this. How might we solve this? And you all put in some ideas for how we could solve it. That was about, that's called idea generation, right? We increase the number of options that we had. So that's widening of scope. So idea, how might we statements are, the purpose of them is to generate ideas. It's a widening exercise. There are other tools that are about narrowing scope, validating ideas. So prototyping, for example, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes is about taking ideas and validating them, figuring out the best one and eliminating options. So it's about narrowing, right? So if we had 2 or 3 possible options from our how might we statements, and we selected 2 or 3 that were great, let's say we built 2 or 3 prototypes for each of those options, quick, cheap prototypes. By having people interact with those prototypes, we'd get feedback, we'd validate which one we think is the best, and we'd be narrowing scope. So prototyping can be a narrowing for a narrowing purpose. So that's what we talk about when we're talking about purpose. It's like, when should we use it? So that is the basis of how I'd recommend you could study for the exam. That is the end of my presentation. But we have, I'm looking at the clock, we've got about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have questions about any of the content that we talked about, but about any question about the exam in particular? Yes, Annette, the exam it's your standard 60 question or 65 question. And yes, they have those they have the choose the best 2 options questions in there, I believe. Oh, glad. Thanks, Everest. I'm glad you liked this session. Has anyone, before we drop, has anyone done the strategy design exam yet? Or has anybody done the new business analysis exam yet? BA, yes. Did the BA plan to do this next? Yes, BA and strategy both. Yes, BA. Jitendra, what did you, BA 2 weeks ago. Jitendra, what did you think of the strategy design exam?
I really liked it. It was not something very new, right? We used to do it.
Yep.
But few contents were definitely good on the trailhead.
Yep.
That definitely give you, I will say, the confirmation that how we are doing, and also some of the new technique that can be leveraged in the future workshops.
Yeah, yeah. What did you think about did you think it was similar to the BA one?
A little bit overlap, but I will not say very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like there was overlap in some it's kind of similar type of stuff, but there's not a lot of overlap in terms of methods. I thought they oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what I found is BA was a little bit more generic, right? But strategy designer was very focused on the methods, right? That was mentioned in the trailhead, like the journey mapping that you showed, right? Those are very focused on the methodology. And BA was like more like normal day-to-day general what the BA is supposed to do. That's what I.
Yeah. So Pablo, what do you recommend to go first, BA or strategy designer cert? I think it depends on what you're looking to do. I'd say the BA cert, the first thing about the BA cert, it has the admin cert as a prerequisite. Strategy designer does not have prerequisites. But I'd say from the recommended experience for strategy designer, you probably want to have some experience doing some of these kind of interviewing, workshopping, prototyping type methods before you do the strategy designer one. But it kind of depends on where you are and what you're looking to do in terms of which one to do first.
I think Annette has asked a very good question, Brian, if you see.
Annette?
Yeah. Any idea or information that was shared on what this certification will be using for keep current release things, like we do for the more technical. So I think for BA it's an admin certification, but not sure on the strategy.
I would guess, I don't know this, but I would guess that the part that I talked about in terms of using Salesforce features to better understand your customers, I would bet that there's going to be some questions about that. Those questions weren't the bulk of the exam, right? Like Jitendra, I don't know if you remember, there were some questions around like when you'd use Service Cloud, when you'd use Experience Cloud, when you'd use various tools to get intelligence, when you'd use like Einstein to get intelligence about your customers. So there could be some kind of keep current stuff around that as new features are introduced. I don't know, Jitendra, if you have thoughts.
I think I'm not sure we can talk a lot about the question, but
Yeah.
yes, in the area, Brian is right. There are some area on analytics side, sales service side, little bit tangentially questions are related to that, but I will say not a lot of them.
Yeah. Yep. So Anand, I think we'll all find out together what the renewal trails look like. So, well, sounds like a plan. So I'm going to give it 10 more seconds if anybody else has any more questions. But while we wait, Sambir, on a lighter note, does section 4 feelings take care of happiness and feelings of the, of the developers who are also part of the strategy design, or this applies to client side only? Barbara, since no other cert is a prerequisite, I would imagine it will have its own renewal requirement. Yep, very possible.
Yeah.
In Rhythm, great session. So great, everybody. Well, I just wanted to say thanks everybody for participating. This was a great session, and I appreciate all the conversation in the chat. That's what make these sessions so good. So really appreciate everybody's time, and hope you all have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Brian. Awesome session, right? I'm pretty sure all our audience learn a lot. Once we upload on the YouTube, right, I'm expecting more comments coming up there. So you might need to jump on there and answer a few of the questions there.
All right. Well, I will keep my eye on it, and I will be ready.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice weekend.
See you, everybody.